So you're thinking about taking the GMAT. That's one tough decision. First, you gotta have some information about the exam. So let me quickly go over what the GMAT is about and how it works. Before getting on with the content, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to click on the notification bell. The GMAT is a standardized computer exam that has been around since the 50s. It is basically a requirement for most top MBA programs in the world and other finance-related programs. Over 250,000 exams are taken worldwide each year, and it keeps on becoming more and more popular. Over the years, the GMAT has changed a lot. Its most important change came in 1997 when it changed from a paper format to a computer format. It was at this time also that it acquired its most important characteristic. It became a CAT. CAT stands for Computer Adaptive Test, which basically means that the questions presented in the exam do not follow a predetermined order, but rather, based on the performance of the test taker, the computer chooses what question to present next. So for example, if you are taking the exam and you are performing well, if you are answering several questions correct, the computer will give you harder and harder questions, and you'll be able to get a really high score. On the other hand, if you're struggling, if you're answering several questions incorrect, the computer will give you easier questions, but your total score is also going to be low. There are other additional factors that play an important role on your total score. If you want to know more about them, you can check our video called The Mechanics of the GMAT Exam. Being a CAT enables the GMAT to perform two tasks very efficiently. The first one is that it reduces plagiarism. Because questions are chosen based on the performance of the individual, two people taking the exam at the same time will most likely get very different questions in their exams. So plagiarism is reduced to a minimum. Number two, the GMAT only needs a small sample of questions to make a very accurate assessment of your actual level, right? So there's very little room for error. The score is very accurate. If someone gets a low score, it just means that they are not ready. They need to study more. There are 4 sections in the exam, but only 2 contribute to the main total score. The first section is the analytical writing assessment, the typical essay. They will present an argument like this one and ask you to evaluate its strength. You must write a small 300 to 500 word essay in 30 minutes or less. This section has an independent scoring system that goes from 1 to 6 and does not contribute to the main score. The second section is a fairly new section called Integrated Reasoning. 12 questions mixing reading, data analysis, spreadsheets, graphs, and so on. This section also has an independent scoring system that goes from 1 to 8 and does not contribute to the main score. And the sections of verbal and quantitative, the main global score that goes from 200 to 800 will be calculated only from these 2 sections. A 700 has always been considered the golden score, meaning that if you score 700 or above, you should have no problems applying to the top MBA programs in the world. You also need to consider that the GMAT is only one of the factors that will be reviewed by the admissions committee in your application. The other factors are your work experience, your extracurricular activities, your academic performance, and the other requirements of admissions such as the essays, the recommendation letters, etc., etc. If you are an international student, then you also need to take the TOEFL or the IELTS in addition to the GMAT. The verbal section is 65 minutes long and consists of 36 multiple choice questions. There are 3 types of questions. The first type of question is sentence correction. A sentence will be presented and you must evaluate how well written it is. You have to consider grammar, meaning, and style. This is an example of a sentence correction question in case you are wondering what it looks like. The second type of question is critical reasoning. An argument will be presented and you will have to strengthen it, weaken it, find the assumption, or infer something from it. Here you have an example. And the third and final type of question is reading comprehension. A reading passage from a journal or an academic text will be presented and 3 or 4 questions will be asked about it. So, the verbal section. This is the section most feared by international students, and rightly so. What I can tell you about it is, from all my years of experience tutoring for GMAT, is that if you are a reader, if you are a person, someone who constantly reads newspapers, articles, academic journals, etc., and you have a good command of English, if your vocabulary knowledge is good, then you should have no problems. You have no limits in the verbal section, all right? On the other hand, if you are not a reader, and I'm not only talking about novels here, I'm talking about academic subjects. If you're not a reader, or you have problems with vocabulary, sometimes you read a newspaper and there are several words that you don't understand the meaning of, then you are going to have a very tough preparation ahead. Okay, your ability to reading English determines your limitations in this section. So here you have an example of an intermediate critical reasoning question. You can read the argument and see what the GMAT's average English writing level is like. Another thing that we have to understand about the verbal section is that the GMAT is an American exam based on business writing, all right? So especially for the sentence correction section, you have to provide an answer that sounds American and that sounds business-like, all right? So if you are presented with an answer choice, an option that sounds overly formal, overly polite, maybe poetic, or scientific sounding, like, they are not actually wrong, but for GMAT purposes, they are not business-like, and therefore they have to be eliminated. All right, so keep your answers American and business-like. Here you have an example of a sentence correction question in which you will see how business writing and business style plays an important part in the answer. The right answer has been highlighted. Overall, sentence correction is a section in which students improve the most. There is a lot of theory to be learned, even for native speakers. On the other hand, reading comprehension is the most static section. In a 2 to 5 months program, students improve somewhat, but not too much. So, as I said before, your previous ability to read English will determine your limitations in this section. The quantitative section is 62 minutes long and consists of 31 multiple choice questions. Among the topics tested are the following: general algebra and equations, number properties, statistics, geometry, probabilities, combinations, among others. It is important to note that knowledge of calculus or trigonometry is not necessary. Any of these topics could be presented in 2 different types of questions. The first one is problem solving, in which you have to choose the exact solution to a problem. The second is data sufficiency, in which you will have to decide whether some statements presented are sufficient to provide an answer. So the quantitative section. Most of the concepts that are tested in the quantitative section are concepts that we've already seen in high school or college. All right, but the GMAT takes those concepts, takes those questions, and gives them a different spin, kind of thing. Okay, so the questions, for example, in the SAT, they are more direct. That's the difference. They are direct, they are to the point. It's easy to know what they are asking us for. With the GMAT, it gets a little tricky. First, you have to think what they're really asking you for, what they want as an answer. A lot of people get confused and they end up giving the wrong answer just because they had problems interpreting the question. So be really careful. So here you have a tricky GMAT quantitative question in which you see that it is not too easy to interpret what they're asking us for, but once you do the work, then you're ready to go. The quantitative section also presents several word problems, meaning that they will give you a paragraph from which you will have to extract the numeric and quantitative information. So an intermediate level of reading is essential for you to understand the story, all right? It doesn't matter if you're really good at quant, if you don't understand what you're being told, if you don't understand the story that is behind all those numbers, then you're gonna have tons and tons of problems. So here you have another example of a quantitative question, one that has a lot of wording. So just take your time, read it, and see if you're able to infer what they're asking you for. Overall, what people complain about the quantitative section is the time limit. Of course, if you're giving an infinite time, then it all becomes really easy, right? You can answer anything, it's too easy. But try that in 2 minutes, okay? So the thing here is learning or getting good at GMAT Quant means to get good at finding the shortest, the fastest ways to answer. That's a strategy. So And this is something a lot of people have problems with even when they're good at quant, for example, engineers, right? Sometimes they don't know the fastest way to answer. So if you want to get good at quant, you want to not only get good at quant theoretically, but also be savvy, be witty. You want to find those holes, you want to find those fast ways to give an answer as soon as possible. So now you know what the GMAT is about. Alright, so it's not an easy exam to prepare for, especially for those who are working full-time. You can get a tutor to help you out, or you can do it on your own, it's up to you, but the most important thing is that you have to fully commit. Alright, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to get a really high score, but you do need to be very disciplined and very committed. If you found this video useful, please leave us a comment, subscribe to our channel and hit on the notification bell to receive the latest info. We are going to be uploading tons of information on the GMAT, GRE and MBA applications. Also, if you plan on preparing for the GMAT, GRE, or you want to get some help with your admissions process, visit us at www.libertytestprep.com.